TTRPGs. Pathfinder, Daggerheart, Dungeons and Dragons, Star Wars, Star Trek, Warhammer, the Discworld, something homebrewed. You pick the setting, but regardless of your pick, the beginning of a story can always be a little bit tricky. You have to set the pace, set the scene, introduce your audience to the world and the current situation, and whatever anyone says, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So why not get a little help and make it epic at the same time? How can you do that? Well, easy. Take inspiration from history. You'll never run out of ideas, I promise you. You can take inspiration from big events or zoom in and focus on a single small area and event. History is not some boring, dull, school subject, but a tool that you can use to create stories, write books, make music, make games, and understand the world around you. So, I recommend you grab a tasty drink, hold on to your socks, and let me tell you a tale that will surely inspire you to start a whole new world of your own. Hello all you wonderfully funky people, Funky Monkey here, welcome to today's episode. To inspire the start of a new campaign, I will tell you about the Great Calamity, the Great Eruption. The eruption that destroyed and froze in time multiple settlements. In other words, the eruption that buried the Roman settlement of Pompeii and several others. When it comes to calamities, you can always ramp up the events, to go from a calamity to a cataclysm. Like in our case, for example, you can ramp up the eruption of one volcano to a worldwide event, to a series of eruptions triggered by some malevolent entity, threatening the existence of life itself. But I think that's actually the idea for a whole campaign in itself. Or you could combine the calamity with rediscovery and weave a whole legend about the city that was once buried and needs to be explored, as it contains some precious artifacts that could help someone. You decide who and in what way. But for today, let's talk about the eruption of just one volcano and the rediscovery of one settlement in particular. As a short history of Pompeii, it is a very old settlement being established somewhere in the 9th or 8th century BCE. Then it was taken over by the Greeks in the 8th century, and by the end of the 5th century BCE, it was taken over by the Samnites, a warlike group of people from the mountains of Italy that were also enemies of Rome. The first official mention of Pompeii was in 310 BCE during the Second Samnite War, when a Roman fleet landed in Pompeii's port. At the end of the war, the whole region of Campania, including Pompeii, joined the Roman Confederation and became an ally of Rome. They were not completely taken over by Romans until 89 BCE, so almost 300 years later, when Pompeii took part in the social wars. In essence, a revolt of Rome's allies who were asking for citizenship and equal rights, but were being refused constantly by Rome. After the war, the city and everything south of the Po River received citizenship, but as a punishment for the city's participation in the revolt, a colony of Roman veterans was established in and around the city. Slowly, Latin replaced the local Oscan language, and the culture started changing, becoming more Roman. The city even received a Roman name, Colonia Cornelia Veneria Pompeianorum. The status of the city grew as many rich individuals wanted to live in the Bay of Naples. The lands here were very fertile, so many lands and villas were built. The city's ports were a hub for goods that were to be transported to Rome or to inland Italian peninsula, and of course people always wanted to live in very gorgeous places. And the coast near Pompeii is a very amazing place to live in. Moreover, the city also housed multiple entertainment venues, such as the Amphitheater of Pompeii, the Grand Theater, the Odeon, the Forum Baths, and even had running water. So, there were many reasons to want to live in Pompeii if you were alive during those times. With that little bit of history out of the way, let's focus on the eruption and the events before and after it. The first signs. Before the actual eruption, Campania was accustomed to small and frequent earthquakes. But on 5th of February 62 CE, a different earthquake shook the area. A massive earthquake damaged both Pompeii and its neighboring cities, Herculaneum, Oplontis, Stabie and Nuceria. It is believed that the earthquake registered somewhere around 6 on the Richter magnitude scale, so it was nothing to joke about. The earthquake hit on a day of celebration for Pompeians, as it was a day of two sacrifices, one dedicated to Augustus and one to the guardian spirits of the city. As people were celebrating, the earthquake hit, bringing some buildings down and damaging many more. This also led to fires around the city, which was a huge problem in ancient times. There were of course victims, but we don't know how many, and of course there was a lot of panic, that's for sure. The city started recovering and even flourished after the earthquake, and new edifices were built. In 64 CE, the area was hit yet again by another series of earthquakes, but nothing as significant as the one 2 years before. In 79 CE, 4 days before the eruption, the area was hit again with many smaller earthquakes, but no one took notice as it was very common. When did it start? At 1 PM on the 24th of August, 79 CE, it started. The first thing that came was a violent eruption, spewing a column of gas and hot pumice and ash. Slowly the ash and pumice started raining down, blanketing the area. Over the next few hours, rescue operations started and many of the inhabitants of Pompeii managed to get away, carrying some of their valuables. The pumice and ash rain lasted almost a whole day. The Imperial fleet stationed at Misenum across the Naples Bay, 29 kilometers away, was instrumental in saving the population as they reacted without delay. The fleet was under the command of Admiral Gaius Plinius Secundus, or Pliny the Elder as he is known to history. An admiral and one of the most important and well-known ancient authors. The next day, the area south and southeast of the volcano were engulfed in pyroclastic flows. These are flows of gases, ash and other volcanic materials that move at incredible speeds of at least 100 km per hour and up to 700 km per hour, or between 62 miles per hour and 435 miles, and are incredibly hot, reaching around 1000 degrees Celsius or 1832 degrees Fahrenheit. The cloud ejected from the volcano was about 33 kilometers high, reaching the stratosphere, and the volcano spewed around 1.5 million tons of hot pumice and ash per second. This particular eruption, gave the name to a whole kind of volcanic eruptions, the Vesuvian type. Now back to the pyroclastic wave. By the time it reached Pompeii, the pyroclastic wave was around 250 degrees Celsius or 480 Fahrenheit. It collapsed multiple buildings, burying under the rubble many of those who sought shelter indoors, but the heat itself was what killed those still left in the city. The city was also hit, of course, by multiple earthquakes that collapsed even more buildings, and the whole event triggered a tsunami in the Bay of Naples, making it hard to navigate the bay and try and save more people. The Imperial fleet did the best it could and saved many lives, but couldn't save everyone. During the rescue operations, Admiral Gaius Plinius Secundus ordered that the ships under his command return to Stabia's port to rescue the stragglers and those who managed to escape Pompeii at the last second. But unfortunately, he was found on the 26th of August, collapsed and covered with ash, after most likely being killed by poisonous gases from the pyroclastic wave, as he presented no injuries. By the end of the eruption, the ash layer was around 6 meters deep, almost 20 feet. The best eye accounts come from Gaius Plinius Cecilius Secundus, or Pliny the Younger, Pliny the Elder's nephew, who saw everything from the coast of Misenum. He left the witness accounts in letters that he wrote around 16 years after the eruption. Out of all the letters he wrote, around 250 were found. Pliny the Younger writes in one of his letters about what he witnessed on the 25th of August, after the eruption died down, but the sky remained still dark. And I quote, "Broad flames shone out in several places from Mount Vesuvius, which the darkness of the night contributed to render still brighter and clearer. It was now day everywhere else, but there a deeper darkness prevailed than in the thickest night." The aftermath of the eruption. Emperor Titus appointed 2 ex-consuls to organize and coordinate the relief effort. Titus also donated a considerable amount of money from the imperial treasury to help the refugees affected by the eruption. He also personally visited Pompeii and the other settlements after the eruption, and again 1 year later, in 80 CE. But the destruction was so vast that no reconstruction effort was ever undertaken. Following the eruption, Pompeii was not fully covered, with the tallest buildings sticking out of the settled ash. Both survivors and robbers returned over the years to pillage or to salvage what they could from the city, and they even left marks and messages, such as a graffito found by archaeologists reading "House Dug," buried in the sands of time. Over centuries, the place and name were forgotten, although maps created within the empire still showed Pompeii up to Tabula Peutingeriana in the 4th century, one of the most detailed and complete road maps of the empire ever created. But 2 eruptions of the Vesuvius, one in 471-473 and another one in 512, buried the ruins of the city deeper. Afterwards, the area was known only as La Civita, or the city, going by the terrain features, but almost no one remembered what lay underground. In 1592, almost 1,500 years after the eruption, during the construction of an underground aqueduct, the Italian Renaissance architect Domenico Fontana discovered parts of the ancient city and found walls covered in frescoes and inscriptions. Realizing that perhaps he stumbled upon something valuable, he kept the discovery secret. In 1689, a wall bearing the inscription Decurio Pompeiis, or Town Councillor of Pompeii, was unearthed, and 1 year later, in 1693, a few excavations were carried out, unearthing more of the ancient city. From 1799 up to 1816, another round of excavations were done under the French rule of Naples and revealed several houses. But the most interesting and important leap forward in the understanding and preservation of Pompeii came in 1863, when Giuseppe Fiorelli, an Italian archaeologist, took over the uncovering of the ancient city. He was the first to realize that some of the strange voids in the ash were actually left by decomposed human remains. He was the one who came up with the idea and method of injecting plaster in the voids to preserve what was left of the victims of the eruption. By the way, his method is still used today, but with resin that is clear and preserves the bones better. He was also the first one to scientifically document the excavation and put out a periodic report on the finds and progress of the excavation, enormously contributing to the development of modern archaeology. More and more incredible finds are brought to light each excavation season in Pompeii, and new light is shed on the way Romans lived in the 1st century CE. By the time of the eruption, the city's population was around 15,000. All of the affected settlements had a combined population of over 20,000 people. More than 1,500 victims have been found thus far, but the exact number of those who lost their lives in the catastrophe is unknown. The importance of Pompeii and the other settlements frozen in ash cannot be highlighted enough. And it also gives us as world builders a unique chance of creating stories inspired by this event and those similar to this. How to use this in our world? The eruption of Vesuvius and the fate of Pompeii, Herculaneum, Stabiae, Oplontis, and Nucera, and all other settlements affected can easily be transposed in a homebrewed world. We have the opportunity to start our story before, during, or shortly after such events, with the main characters of our story having to live through such an event and escape by the skin of their teeth, having to live in the aftermath. We can even use such an event as a legend that needs to be investigated. An ancient city holding mind-boggling treasures has been found by mistake, and adventurers are lining up to delve deep in it and uncover its wonders or horrors. You can extrapolate and make the eruption of one volcano the beginning of a terrifying race against time before a James Bond movie type villain tries to bury the world under a thick layer of lava, tephra and ash. And it's up to the adventurers to uncover the plot and stop the villain before their plan comes to fruition. Or perhaps the fire elementals of the world who sleep under volcanoes are waking up for some nefarious reason and they have to be stopped before the world is destroyed. The only limit is your imagination, and I wouldn't worry about that too much if I were you. And with that, Potato's sixth name is Mistress of the Heights. Thank you so much for the privilege of your time, and I truly hope you found some inspiration and learned something new today, and I can't wait to see you all funky people here next time on Funky Monkey MP, the place where you get your dose of history, world building and trivia. Remember, be curious, take inspiration from the past, and never stop learning, world building and creating amazing things, whatever those are, as your mind and imagination are awesome, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. By the way, if you want to help this channel grow and join this funky community, make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit that bell button, and please leave a comment sharing your thoughts down below. I appreciate it. Until next time, have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful funky day. Cheers.